I've been so lucky because Charmers Gems have given me these beautiful polished gemstones. They're not drilled. So the project I'm going to show you is going to be wire wrapping these beautiful gem polished stones. You can do this with sea glass as well. You can do it with broken ceramics, you know, with little pebbles, all sorts of things. These are the smaller versions, and I have done a project already showing you how to make this bracelet. So you'll find that already on my YouTube channel if you're using smaller gems. But I've got these gorgeous, chunky, bigger pieces. So with these larger pieces, you can make things like wall hangings, you know, decorative home decor, because it's the same technique to wire wrap as a small piece. You know, you can make long sort of hanging things to put in a bedroom or a bathroom, or give as a, I don't know, homecoming gift, or a new, you know, if you've moved house for a new gift or a wedding present. So many lovely things you can do with these lovely tumble stones. So some of them you'll see are very flat and some of them are really chunky. So there are different ways to wrap, and I'm going to show you two different ways. One, how to wrap the flat ones, and also how to make a link on both ends. So I'm going to start with the flat ones. I'm using 0.8 20 gauge wire. So I'm going down and making a wrapped loop. So create a circle, leaving about an inch of wire projecting, and wrap that stem projecting wire around just under the circular link that you've just created. So that's going to be your wrapped loop. So just you don't have to wrap and wrap and wrap, just a little bit of a coil, and if you've got too much wire, cut off the excess and just make sure that there's no spiky ends protruding. It's always better to do that now at this stage rather than come back and have to neaten ends. So just straighten out the stem, make sure there's no little end sticking out that will scratch, and that's really what you want. I usually give this a hammer because what it does, it will temper and work harden the very end of my wire, which means it's not going to flop around because it's going to be hard to hold on to everything. So I'm going to put that at one end where I want it to be linked, and then I mark where the other side of the stone is. So obviously you've got to decide which way around you're going to hang the stone, and then at the other point of the stone I make a right angle bend and create my second wrapped loop. So there we go, you're wrapping around just under the stem again. Only need to do one wrap on this one, and then again just the very end, not the wrap bit, just the end of the link, and I'm straightening some of the stem wire as well. That just work hardens it a bit so it's not flopping around, because this is soft silver plated copper wire. And now each stone is going to be a different shape, but hold on to the back and then bring the wire around the front of the stone and then wrap it at the other end, and making sure it doesn't slip because there's a point there, and then bring it back onto the front and then wrap it again around the top. So you're going backwards and forwards and wrapping it round the top, and you'll find it quite hard to start with because it wants to slip all over the place, and you're just going to have to follow your gut instinct here of, does it feel secure as you're wrapping it? Now I've done 2 wraps at the front and 2 wraps at the back, but it's going to slide out, isn't it? I can see it's going to slide out of the side, so I'm going to have to wrap across. So I'm holding it all and then just wrapping completely once and twice across, and then bringing it back around. So I can always secure it back around either one of those links. As I say, each stone is really going to be different, but what you've always got to think, you don't want to over wrap it, because there's usually a beautiful stone, you know, that you don't want to hide underneath. And then because it's still that you need to sort of strengthen and tighten those wires, I always start at the back first. So I look at the back, place it on my mat, and I'm going to twist and what I call tweak the wires. See, I'm putting little twist bends, and that tightens the wire around the stone. See those little kinks? That is also work hardening the wire as I bend it. And then I'm just going to push, if there's any crevices or, you know, sort of shaping points in the stone, just push it in to those areas. And you just keep working, because the point of metal is if you manipulate it, it toughens, it tempers it. So that's what you're doing. You're just going round the stone, work hardening those wires. And you just have to keep doing that until you feel it's safe, it's not going to slip out, it's not going anywhere. And this one feels absolutely fine now with all those little tweaks and twists. And it's very organic. So there you have a link at each end, which means you can dangle something off if you're creating a pendant, or you're creating like the hanging piece. Now this one, you'll see, is much more chunky. It's like a nugget, but it's very uneven shape. So when I'm wrapping something like this, I can't do the same thing. I'm going to measure instead 3 to 4, well, usually about 4 lengths of the piece. So I sort of look at the piece, measure about 4 lengths of it, and then I'm cutting 3 lengths of that length that I measured, if that makes sense. So 3 long pieces. I just want to straighten these pieces out. So this is going to, you can do 3 or 4. I'm doing 3. 3 will be enough, because I always think I don't want to hide my stone with too much wire. So 2 wouldn't be enough, but because it's so many, there's so many angles, but 3 is plenty. And now I'm going to use a tiny bit of 0.4 binding wire. So just a little piece of that, sort of 2.5 inches or so, something like that. You don't need very much. This is just going to bind the center. So hold all those 3 wires together, one on top of the other. So they've got to sit parallel, and then wrap the wire around and make sure they don't bunch up. That's really important. They mustn't bunch up. They must all be one on top of the other. So a few little wraps, doesn't have to be masses. It's basically just to hold the 3 wires at one point. And always end with your wrapping with both wires ending on the same side, because that's going to go inside your piece. I'm just cutting off those pieces on the same side, and then just get my flat nose pliers and just squidge down everything. Make sure it's all scooched up together and it's all nice and neat. And you've just got that little bit of binding right there, and all those 3 are not, you know, sort of scrunched together in a bundle. So you've got to decide where's the base, where you're going to put that base of your cage that you're making. And now I'm going to separate the wires out. So you'll get this sort of star effect at this stage. So separate the wires into a sort of star. I mean, even though your nugget stone is not a, you know, symmetrical, just start off with a sort of star shape. It'll be easier to work with that way. And once you've got that star with the binding in the middle, you place the stone, which you decide which is going to be the base of your pendant, how you're going to hang it. So you place that bit where the binding is. And then you bring, this is why you've got to sort of sit it down. I can't sort of hold it up for you and do it. I'm going to place that there and then bring all the wires around to create a sort of cage around it. Sometimes, if you're finding it's really hard, you can actually put a little bit of double-sided tape on the inside so that it sort of grips the base of the stone. If you find you can't grip everything together, or put a bit of masking tape on the outside if you're finding it really hard to hold. And now go to the top of the stone, and where those wires are, you know, meeting, just put a little bend at the top. And this means it'll sort of take a form around the contour of the stone and grip it much better. So just a little bend outwards. Do you see that little kink? It goes outwards. And you'll have a lot more grip then to holding the piece together. So that's the top. Now take any one of those wires and use that to secure all those projecting end wires together. So a nice tight wrap around the top. So that's going to secure everything together, and then the stone's not going to go anywhere. I'm not using it all because I don't want to make it too bulky at the top. So just 2 or 3 wraps at the top to get it to hold everything together and to create that sort of cage around the tumblestone. And now you're going to spread the wires out, keeping one central one, which will be, so you're only left with 4 coming out, but you want that central one to be your suspension link. Now my wires on the sides are a little bit long. I usually like to leave about 1 inch for this, but obviously there's no rules, as I said before. If you want, have them a bit longer, or you want less, doesn't really matter. I just don't want it to, because I'm going to make spirals out of these, and I don't want the spirals to be so big that they take over from the stone. I want the stone to be the main focal point. So with all those projecting wires, I'm just putting tiny little, sort of like a little head pin or loop at the end so I don't spike myself as I'm working on them. So I start off by doing that on all of them. So that gets me ready to create little tight spirals that roll in towards that projecting central wire. So just bring all those in towards the top of the stone. At this stage, I'm just concentrating on that. I'm not going to even, start making it look pretty. It's just all, at this point, I'm just sort of fixing it so that it's not going to move around, so that the stone is held and there's nothing protruding. So there we go, we've got those little spirals coming out there. And now we want to, like the last stone, we want to tighten those wires, and that will also work harden them. So just make sure you've got the binding at the base and that hasn't slipped, and then put your little twists and tweaks. And I mean, you might not have to do it. It might feel very solid and you feel, okay, I don't need to do that. I actually like the look of the little twists and tweaks. I think it adds another decorative detail. So I do it, apart from it being functional, I also do it because I like the look of it. So you just make sure it feels really tight around the stone, depending on the contours of it. As you see, it's completely irregular stone, but the wire is now hugging every bit of it. And now I'm just going to fold those little spirals down to hide my wire wrap underneath. Just creates a nice little decorative feature at the top. And now you could place another bead on there before you make a suspension link, but I haven't got one, so I'm just going to roll my wire all the way down to the top there, and I'm going to spread it out so that it's sitting. If I've got too much, I can always cut a bit off, but see, now you can see, look, if I was going to put a chain through the top or a cord, that's where it will thread. So that's ready to go. And you can see that's got a nice little sort of fitted cage. So that's how I do the bigger, chunkier nuggets. Now, lastly, I'll just do one that, again, if you have a chunky stone at the top and then a thinner base, you can roll and roll and roll, just like you make jump rings. You make a coil. So this is the third version for all these different types of stones for wire wrapping. So I'm going to find one that is thinner, fat at the top. See, very fat at the top, and then it goes thinner at the base. Of course, you can use the cage that we've just done, but this is another version for a pendant, and it's quite nice and freestyle. So I'm holding that coil at the top and just gripping the wire and wrapping it in a random fashion around, coming to the thinner part. And once I've done my random wire wrap and I feel it's completely sort of gone round a couple of times, I can unravel that coil a bit, then wrap the end around the base of it. And now that feels like it will hold in there. So I'm going to cut off the excess and then just neaten that little end. You see there's always a little end somewhere, you've got to sort of push it in. And the good thing about having the coil at the top is you might not want all those wires. It just gives you a stability when you're wire wrapping, because it can sit on that chunky bit. So back to your tweaking. Tweak as much as you want until it feels like it's really hugging the stone. It's really got to be lovely and tight. You don't want these things to come apart and fall off, especially if you're giving them or you're making them to sell. And you'll just get a feel for, how much you can manipulate the wire. Sometimes when I don't tweak, I push the rounded part of my whammer just to make these lovely sort of curved areas on the wire. So you get a lovely curved area. So you don't always have to tweak. You can, and make sure you push the wires against the stone so they feel really tight. And you can use your pliers to burnish as well, sort of press and rub the wire on the stone so it doesn't move around. So now I'm just tightening up that coil again, and I'm not going to keep it as thick as that. I'm going to cut off some of the coils, just like you would with jump rings. So you can keep those as jump rings that you might need on the chain for later. So I'm just going to leave 3 at the top. And that again can be turned into a lovely pendant necklace. You could maybe put a beaded cord on this one, or it's really up to you. Use a ribbon, a piece of leather, and each of these stones makes a completely unique piece of art jewellery. So just have fun making your own wire wrap tumble stones. Thank you so much for watching, and do check out Charmer's Gems for their beautiful stones.